Watching 1000 and counting down, I couldn't help but bring back the one and only Bobby Nash. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. So I think I figured out the freelancing thing.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Very nice. It's a very interesting way to work.
It's a hard one for people to wrap their heads around. Right. It's a hard one for people to wrap their heads around because it's really about a lot of self-discipline and
Mhm.
self-work. And ironically, the secret is of all things believing in yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you have to be willing. I always say that, someone told me this once. So, I mean, this is not something I came up with, but to do any kind of freelance work, writing, art, music, acting, you have to be willing to be unemployed
Mhm.
because it's going to happen. It is not a go to the job, work 40 hours a week, collect a paycheck, rinse and repeat. That the freelance life is very feast or famine.
You can balance it. Like one of the
Well,
things
sure
I've
you
learned about
can,
this,
but
one of the things I've learned is okay. So right now I'm doing okay. I'm not quite where I want to be. I just launched my Patreon today,
hmm,
so yay to that. I even got my first patron, which is kind of
nice,
cool.
very nice.
Yeah, a whole dollar. But hey, passive income.
You
You
know
can't.
what? That's a good start.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah,
how I'm looking at it. It's a
yeah.
start.
But yeah, because a lot of work in freelance is very much out of you as the freelancer's control. You know, to a point. I mean, because you
It,
are
it,
working
it's a
for
50-50.
yeah,
It's a 50-50. You have to accept the fact that there's going to be times when you put yourself out there, you're not going to get anything. Like
right,
that's the thing you have to accept.
right.
But what you
And delays. I mean, delays happen too
Oh
because
no, sure, no,
that's
absolutely,
a big part of it, and
absolutely, no,
yeah,
you don't have exactly the most reliable paycheck,
right.
but it's also at the same time okay. Like biggest thing I've understood about freelancing is this is when things are good, you hustle for more. That's I think the biggest secret to it because again, as you say, there's points where it's feast or famine, but you
Hmm.
minimize the famines. But when things are good, you don't stop putting yourself out there. Like
Right.
I wrote a post yesterday about selling my work. In fact, I do it all the time. Like, you become a salesman essentially
Hmm.
being a freelancer,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah. You're
and
technically running a small business.
yeah, you know what, you absolutely are. But your primary job, if you really sit there and think about it, is you're saying I want to serve you, and I will do so for a price. Doesn't matter what the freelance
Hmm.
gig is. That's what it essentially is. So what you got to realize then at that point is who are you serving? What are you doing? Where are you going? Right
Hmm.
now, I've hit since February of this year. Since February of this year, creative work has eclipsed day job, like side gig work. My second job work.
Hmm.
Second job has been a supplementary income, and that's wonderful. It's kept a little bit of stability in the event things did go wrong, especially like up until I think like again February this year, just something clicked. Right. Ironically, one of those delays just said, I'm not doing this no more. I'm not going to
Hmm.
take this anymore. And suddenly, doors open. It was just that's how it worked. It's weird that way, but it comes down to self belief. It really, really does. I find the more confident I am, the more I attract work.
Sure, absolutely.
That's how this goes. Like I literally did some work this morning with two different clients. Right, one's a writing gig. I was playing the role of editor there. I'm going to see what the client. It's what the client wants to do at this point. I mean, I'll go with the direction he kind of picked. I am ghostwriting some blogs, and the client is adding their own touches to it. I didn't agree with this touch, but I explained why. But as a my job, it's like it's your site, it's your thing. My name's not on it, so I don't really like
Hmm.
grand scheme of things. It doesn't hurt me if it is does or doesn't work this way. But it is my job to be honest with my client, so I'm
Right,
doing that.
right.
And and the second thing is right, and the other one I'm doing is video editing, right? And what I found was there's a ebb and flow to it. Um, there's a magic to it. And it's been like I've been straddling the line of living wage
Hmm.
with my freelancing, which has been great. I've been able to catch up on a lot of things I was behind on, and I've been slowly getting myself ready to go to the next phase, which is when this series turns 1000, go on the road.
Hmm.
right? So, but what I found, what I found was what you have to control as a freelancer is your discipline. That is crucial. I don't work like somebody that works a day job, but that doesn't mean I don't work, and it doesn't
Right.
mean I have to put in the time and the work. I do. I have to. In some ways, it's more. In some ways, it's less.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That. There's no what's they say? There's no middle ground. It's like sometimes it's a little bit of one, it's a little bit of the other. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but the other aspect of it is I've learned that um, you have to learn to balance with. As for the things you can't control, it's like, okay, how can I use this as an opportunity? Like
Right.
you get mad in the moment, but I mean, when it's all said and done, it's like, okay, I'll just use this as an opportunity to do some other things. Something I'm not going to talk about on the air kind of just happened and just and put some things into perspective. And I'm just going to be like, okay, you know,
Right. There's always, that's part of there's always multiple projects open
yep,
because delays happen. Instead of stopping and waiting for the delay to be over, you hop on to the next project
that's right.
and you can come back. And I mean, because when people first go freelance, there's that, it almost feels like a vacation at first because suddenly you're home,
Yes,
you're not going to the office. And it's an easy trap to fall into. I'll write later. And then you realize I didn't do anything today. That's the trap you have to avoid.
that's
And
the
yeah,
discipline part. That's the one of
that's
the
this one part. You know, these are the hours I work. And not just the discipline for you, you have to teach other people because people assume if you're home, you're free. You've got free time.
oh, absolutely no. I think that
And
is one of the most hilarious truths. I put in more time some days than I ever did
mm-hmm,
working a day job. The beautiful thing about a day job is you get to go home. For
right.
more often than not, you don't, unless you are having a major responsibilities on a project. You get to like do other things because you
Mm-hmm,
don't right here. This is part of my job. Like whether people realize it or not, this podcast is
right.
how
this
I
is
stay employed.
this is part of your job. It's part of your marketing and promotion.
Yeah,
It's part of a lot of things. Part of your
yeah, yeah.
branding. Part of
It's a platform. It's a platform
yeah.
for me. So I have to constantly maintain it. Right now, I have schedule things I have to work with from time to time. Right, and I'm slowing down a little. I've slowed down a little bit this year on purpose because I'm not quite sure what the road schedule is going to be like just yet, and I want to
Mm-hmm,
be sure it's a manageable one. So going down a little bit, ironically, helped my numbers go up.
mm-hmm.
Ironically, a little bit as well. Right, there's such a thing as too much quantity, but that's the thing. Like it's a precarious. The hardest, the first year for me, it wasn't the vacation part. It was, I love this. How do I not fuck this up?
Mm-hmm,
That was the first year. I realized that mentality too is a mistake
mm-hmm.
because that then you're worried, then that you almost have that self-fulfilling prophecy of messing it up. And then you have to kind of start all over again.
Yeah. What worked for me is I realized that if I wanted this to be my job, my career, I had to treat it like a job.
Mm-hmm.
When I wrote as a hobby, back in the day, I wrote when I felt like it.
Mm-hmm.
I did creative stuff when I felt like it. Now that it's my job, like any other job, there are days where I just don't feel like doing this at all. But I still have to sit down and go, no, nope, you go to the office, you get some work done. There's and there's being a writer, and this is the same as true of any creative function. The writing is only half the job. You
Yep.
know, I spend a lot of my days doing admin work, setting up interviews, doing podcasts, doing conventions, ordering books, writing press releases, those kind of things. So while that keeps you busy, it doesn't add any words to the books, to the
No.
stories. So you have to really learn how to juggle it.
Yeah, yeah. Actually,
And
that's been the hardest part from this. Like for the last few months, I've
mhm,
been busy. Like legitimately, I from a client work standpoint, I'm most days of the month I'm doing. Yesterday was my quote unquote my off day. I still ended up doing client work
mhm,
in some, right? I like not major stuff. I like. It's funny. You have to have the confidence to know when you need to take a day off too. And that again, that's one of those weird like mind fucks you
mhm,
have as a creative is I can take that. No, you need to take a day off every so often. But even on my days off, even on my days off, I'm looking at the fact that I'm always doing a little something, whether I want to or not. Right now, like one thing I'm doing a little, my side gig is a hockey arena. So there now everything's doing playoffs, and so my hockey team didn't make the playoffs, but all the little teams made the playoffs. So we're going through that run of that gamut right now. Right. So so next week is going to be pretty much a wash creatively for me, outside of a little work in the morning. So I'm going to try to get some of the littler jobs done next week. Right. So then when I go back to my regular schedule the week after, I'm going to have more time to do what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
So,
Because like for me today, like I went to my dad had a doctor's appointment, and then we went out to lunch, and I actually took the afternoon off. I went and saw Guardians of the Galaxy before we came on here, and then I'm doing this. By the time we finish this, and I go make dinner. It's 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Well, yeah, but that's
so it's
it,
my
right?
but that's my day off. Technically, I planned it as a day off, but I still wrote while I was at the doctor's office with my dad on the phone, and
I put 1,000 words into my novel last night.
Yeah,
because I could, right? And now, actually, again, because I've been so busy, I'm trying to balance that writing books on top of everything else I'm doing. That has been tricky, right? And like I said, and then on top of that, I'm hustling for work. I'm advertising. I'm doing all these different things. So my work days, some days I start at like noon, 1 o'clock. Again, prerogative, admit. But then I'll go to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's a work day. It legit is. And then there are some days I don't do anything. I just make a point, or what I will do sometimes on those really long days, I'll give myself a couple hours off here and there.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Absolutely, just give myself a couple hours off. I'll go somewhere. I'll draw. I'll go somewhere and just explore. It's nice outside too, so I decided to use the outside as a reward system. I do some tasks. I get to go outside and enjoy my day a little bit, because I look at a screen all day, and that drives me up a wall. And that's it. Like what I've learned about this is, if I love what I do, how can I make sure that keeps happening?
Right.
That has been the magic secret to this whole thing. That's my approach. I don't look at it, how can I mess it up anymore? I'm not going to mess it up. I'm not going to let myself mess it up. What I'm going to do now is, how can I make what I want to happen, and not let anything get in my way?
Yep, and that's where planning comes in. I mean, I have plans. I have, I have deadlines and spreadsheets, and this needs to be done here, so I know what's where, and so when I do juggle things, I know what's coming in. Then rush things come in, and so yeah, a lot of it, planning helps a lot. You can avoid some of those pitfalls.
Yeah, I mean, and even when pitfalls do happen, I mean, look, even
and they will,
they always do. So I find, okay, what can I do to take advantage of the opportunity presented? And that's kind of what I got to look at going forward. And because again, I'm at that point in my, like I said, I'm winding down my time in Calgary. I'm getting ready to take the show permanently on the road.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, because I'm too old. Bobby is either my greatest midlife crisis ever, or I'm finally growing up. I'll let us wiser people than me make that decision. Because I don't know.
Right.
But I just realized, for me, that's it. Everything I'm doing now, I'm doing this month and next month are crucial. I'm taking care of, try to sell as many comic books as I can. I have a big giant stash of comics I want to get rid of. It's going to be interesting to see how I pull that off this month, if I can pull it off this month, because there's a unexpected obstacle to that. But there's been a couple since I've tried to sell my comics. One of them been my storage locker got broken into in December.
Yeah.
So, but here, in an odd way, it might have been actually lucrative, because how sometimes you lose, some comics aren't worth anything.
Right.
It's very possible that a lot of the comics they grabbed weren't worth anything.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I got it. I in the grand value scheme, I don't know. So I just did it based on cover price. So I either did really well or I didn't. I learned So it works out in odd ways, but it also, it's like, okay, I couldn't, when I was going to really, really sell these things, I couldn't do it. Now, on the flip side, I taught myself how to freelance and sell. So I think the trade-off was worth it in the long run. But in the short run, I got a heck of a time crunch for the next 2, 3 months trying to get everything done. I'm going to be a machine. I'm going to have to be a machine most of the time now.
Yeah. Yeah, and something, I mean, that's, when deadlines hit, I mean, that's what you have to do. You have to let everybody know, leave me alone. I'm working. I can't do this. I can't do that. Or,
Yeah.
plan things. I try to tell people, it's like, family and friends. It's like, I don't mind going out and having a meal with you or catching a movie together. Don't call me an hour before and say, let's go do it.
Yeah, no, I'm
Talk to
past that.
me on the day before, and I can juggle work around to do it.
Well, that's just it. There's spontaneity. Like there is a degree of spontaneity to life. Like there's by need and necessity, but there's a point to when like we're all adults. We can all kind of figure our shit out at least a little bit. At least theory, right? Fingers crossed. Some days I wake up and I wonder what the hell I'm doing, but that's neither here or there. Um, but that's just it. Like what I've learned is I value planning a lot
Hmm.
because I find with planning you get more shit done, and oddly allow for more spontaneous stuff. It's kind of weird how that works. The more
Hmm.
you discipline yourself, the more you create opportunity for good things to happen.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually been the big lesson of being back in Calgary for the last year and a half,
Hmm.
actually. The more you discipline your time, the more you create opportunities for things to happen. And I've kept that in my head going forward. And now comes, like I said, now I'm in mode of, okay, when August gets around, I want to be at X or Y. And that's kind of what I'm going to make happen.
Hmm. Well, I think it's very important to set. This is one because I get questions about this all the time. I think it's very important to set goals. Goals are important,
Mhm.
but attainable goals. You know, but you set multiple goals.
Yeah.
Don't just jump to, I'm starting, and here's where I want to end up. There's a lot of steps,
Oh, absolutely.
and
No.
each of those steps can be a goal, and then
Yeah,
kind of celebrate those goals when you make them.
absolutely. Like I said, I got my first patron today.
Hmm.
Right? That was my goal. It's like that went quicker than last time.
Right.
Like Patreon took me the first 2 times I figured it out. My offer stank. That was what it really came down to. I realized this looking at it in hindsight. It's like my offer wasn't good enough. The
Hmm.
current offer I think is a lot better. Right? But you have to kind of again, these are things you figure out as a freelancer. It's like,
Right.
okay, how do I make a good offer? How do I and how do I put myself out there to succeed?
Hmm.
And again, that's a lot of trial and error. And like I said, going on to what I'm going on to, I want to be out here by August. Now, I don't know how attainable that really is. I think it's
Hmm.
possible. I think it's very possible. But it's also shit can go wrong. Shit has a tendency sometimes to go, nope, not yet. I'm like, God damn it, why not? Right, right, right,
Yep.
right. And then that's a human reaction. But I mean, do I think I can make it happen? I think so. We'll see though. I mean, I'm not 100% guaranteeing this,
Yeah.
but I want it to happen. And I
Right.
does
And you
go
work for it.
along what?
Yeah, and you work toward it. I mean, that's
Yeah, exactly. And everything I'm doing now is that work towards it. And that's what I want to do. That's what I'm working. Like, I'm planning on, I'm trying to give myself as little wiggle room as possible. Like,
Mhm.
granted, like I said, if the world ends or if something really crazy happens, I'll reevaluate my goals. I'll
Mhm.
pivot. But the plan is to try to get out of here when I want to get out of here or very close to it in either direction.
Right. Right.
Right. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. I also just the idea of being another winter in Calgary, Alberta is not appealing to me at this point.
Cold winters, are they?
-40, yes.
Yeah. I live in Georgia. We get cold. I mean, it gets cold and icy here, but it doesn't last long. It's a short kind of.
It's short. You get it just long enough to have fun.
Sure. Well, fun is the wrong word because we get snow very sparingly here. When what we go straight to ice, which shuts down everything.
See, we get that here too, but we're so inundated with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't shut. Like what would shut most cities down does not shut this city down.
Right. Right. Because it'll start it'll be nice and clear in the morning. By midday, it starts the cold and the rain and the ice starts. By the afternoon, the city's under a couple of inches of it, and everything is just at a standstill.
Yeah. And here, when it happens here, it's just get the snowplows out because again, it's a different environment. Like it's here, it snows like for 6 months out of the year, so it's it's a different environment. Yeah. But no, I definitely see the slippery. Humid? Is it humid in Georgia?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the last time it snowed here, I remember I woke up one morning, it's around 8, 9 o'clock, and it had snowed overnight. And I'm like, oh great, okay. I went back to bed. When I woke up, all of it was gone. Mm-hmm. So I mean, sometimes it's that fast. And then other times we get those big storms where we're iced in for a week or so. But those are those are a little more rare, but it does happen.
Yeah, it's not every year. It's every so often, but not every year. I get that.
Yeah, but no, it's very humid here, and it's like spring doesn't last very long either. We go from cold to hot, and hot to cold. It is not uncommon for me to turn my air conditioning off and my heat on the same day.
Yep.
So that's
So it's like it's summer, like winter, and an inch. We'll say an inch of spring. Well, let's go with an inch of spring. Is that's right?
Sounds about right. Yeah, it's
and it's like what happened to fall. It's like right.
Yeah, we get like a week of spring and a week of fall, and the rest is either summer or winter.
And you're like, yay, and you're like tears in my eyes. Couldn't we have this for a little longer, just a little bit?
Yeah, because I like sitting out on my porch and writing on the putting a table out and working that way. But during the summer, it's just you have to do that early in the morning because by midday, when it's 100 degrees and humid, and you're just sweat pouring off of you, it's hard to be very productive.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I don't like getting up early in the morning unless I have to.
You and me share that in common, my friend. Yeah. We share that.
It's weird. It's like during the week I don't get up early, but then on the weekends I'm up really early because I'm doing events on the weekends.
Yeah, well, no, because again, when you're up for something, it's easy. It's easy to get up. But when you're like, it's up to me. When it's up to me, do I really want to get up right now? And then it's like,
and I would disagree. It's not easy for me to get up, but I have to, so I do it. But it's not easy.
Well, no, I see. Give me about a few more years under my belt, Bobby. I'll be probably like you. I don't wanna.
Okay, I don't wanna, but I gotta.
Yeah, exactly. No, I gotcha. No, I totally get it. I've been working. Like I said, it's like I said, my schedule is I prefer afternoons, but like I said, sometimes I'll go mornings. Right? It depends on the situation. Right? So, just like I had my client was 10 o'clock in the morning, which is not a big deal. Like that's on borderline reasonable time for anybody to wake up. And everybody listening, it's like, you get up at noon, fuck you. Just fuck you. Right?
Yeah, but I'm up till 4 in the morning.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I or some days more, some days less, right? When I know I have to be doing more regular morning stuff, I try to balance my sleep schedule closer to like 1 or 2. That's when I
right. And plus, I mean, there are times when you deal with clients or you deal with publishers or sometimes you do interviews. Those things happen. You kind of have to adjust your schedule to work around their schedule.
Oh, absolutely.
And
especially
so that
especially like when they're from another part of the like I'm not doing too many Twitch streams for too much longer. I got a few more in me, but not many more in me. And I've interviewed people from across the world, and there's like 18-hour gaps. You're up at odd hours. Like I'm doing an interview at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, shit. Well, I mean that's just how it goes, right?
Right.
That's just totally how it goes. Now in Europe, like Europe, it's about 6-7 hours. It's either my morning or my evening.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it's Anita.
Hey,
Anita,
Anita.
sister. How you doing, Anita? I gotta get you back on the show at some point before it's all said and done too, Miss Anita. Well, we'll have to talk about it at some point. But no, but I say it like that because like that's what I've learned. Like this gig I have signed up for the foreseeable. Hey, congrats. And lots of murder, Miss Anita. I'm almost that's almost not a question, but I mean, actually, I'll straight up say this though: she's a fantastic writer.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
She's a fantastic writer. Wow, I will say that like straight up. It's like wow, you're good, and but it is what it is. No, but going back, like it's that like the biggest thing is it's a completely different mindset. Okay, okay. Did they take your lunch money? But no, I've learned this. Like, this is a discipline game now. This is totally a discipline game, and discipline and self belief. And I realized this too. As a writer, you almost level up doing it, making that decision, that conscious leap, because now you're like, okay, I'm not fucking around. This is what I'm gonna do. And how can I get like you're almost like I think the biggest thing I was surprised at with freelancing was the self-improvement aspects of it. Like I never anticipated it would be such a big part of the game.
Yeah, for me, it was realizing that I'm basically running a business, a small business, because when I first got started writing, the do-it-yourself self-publishing option was not really an option. I mean, it was there, but it was very looked down upon. So if you did it, people were like, "Ugh, you're just not good enough to get hired by a real publisher." Whereas today, doing it yourself is a lot more respectable, a lot more appreciated. Like people don't look down their noses on it, as much.
There's been a significant I would say indie has kind of split a little bit as well between crowdfunding and indie books. I think there's a legitimate split there. That's how big indie has become. But I also think that the other big factor is I think the quality of indie books have significantly improved over the last 20 years. I could read something by you, something by Anita, and then let's compare it to someone like Marissa Mayer. Not that different a weight class, right? And Marissa's fantastic, by the way. I'm not even like this isn't. It's just everybody brings their A game a lot more, and sometimes the indie guys they come up with some really neat ways of doing their A game, and it's like you're as good as anybody out there. And then this is the interesting thing. You ask them why are they indie and not traditional, and sometimes they'll just tell you it's more lucrative for me to be indie at this point.
And there's a freedom, I can try things on my own that some of my publishers might not let me do. Because I do both. I'm both traditional and indie. And so, but I can do things. I started self-publishing. The first thing I did was I got the rights back to one of my books that had been published by a truly terrible publisher. And the only way to get it back out there was to do it myself. And so I re-released it. And then as things went along, I like writing a certain type of book that no publisher was hiring me to do. So I started doing more crime fiction, mysteries and thrillers. That's kind of where more of my passion lies. And so I'm doing those on my own through my imprint. But then I still do other stuff through publishers, and publishers are now noticing it. So I have publishers going, "Hey, would you like to write a mystery thriller for us?" Or so. So there are advantages of being able to try things
Absolutely.
as an indie that you might not get to. It's the same reason that some of the like famous writers will release something under a pen name just because that was the only way to do it, because the publishers go, Stephen King, you can't write anything but horror. And so he's like, oh yeah, I'll show you, or you know, or you know,
That's right. Just call me Rich. Just
yeah.
call me Rich.
Or
That's
like,
right.
you know, the one I really like, the example I really like to use is Nora Roberts, who writes a lot of romance novels, wanted to write a detective thriller. And her publisher says, no, you're a romance writer. So she wrote a novel, submitted it under a fake name. The book went out. The book turns out to be a pretty modest hit. The word gets leaked that it's her, sales skyrocket because her fans will follow her
Yep.
to this new book. And now the publishers are putting both her name and her pen name on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you have to almost prove to publishers that you could do something. They're, you know, they kind of have their ways, and I get it. It's also a gamble for them. You know, if you know, letting her write something that she can sell this book. If she takes time away from writing the next romance novel to write a thriller, that's a gamble, and publishers don't always like to gamble.
It depends on the publisher. Like I said, I mentioned Marissa Mayer. I interviewed her on the podcast. We talked about it. She did like a rom-com in between her epic fantasies YA stuff. Publisher let her do it because they realized it would help her,
right?
Because they just needed a break, right? And sometimes I've seen this too, where publishers, now that doesn't mean that she doesn't give them what they want.
Right.
There is a give and take there.
Well,
but
it depends on the size of the publisher too.
yeah,
I don't, like the big, what is it, 4 or 5, however many the big ones are left, tend to be the ones that are less likely to experiment.
yeah, and which is strange to me because they actually have the most leeway to do it.
Yeah.
But the smaller publishers are hungrier. They have skin in the game, and because of that, they have a tendency to go, you know what? Let's just try it, even if it doesn't work out.
Well, even the lead times are shorter, which allows for that.
Yeah, exactly.
With a big 4 publisher, you've got a good 1.5 to 2 years from the time you write it till it comes out. So you've got 2 years before you even find out if it was a successful experiment.
Well, that's right.
In indie publishing, you can finish the book and it's out within weeks or months, depending on how long the production, editing, and all that process goes.
Absolutely.
So you can test the waters a lot easier and quicker.
Oh, absolutely. No, but that's the way it goes, right? That there's again, it's different sizes, different audiences, different goals. Like by the way, I also understand an author that sticks in their lane too. Like I've mentioned this a few times. Like, Terry Brooks. Terry Brooks is an amazing author, right? It's all Shannara all the time, right? On the one hand, it's like I'd like to see him do more stuff because he's really good. But on the other hand, I can't. If he goes to me, hey, listen, I put Shannara on it, and I can pay my bills for the year, and I'm having fun. Who the fuck am I to tell him anything?
Right.
Right. It's every author has to have their own kind of like goals of who they want to be, and a lot of us do pick niches that fit us, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it goes. There's a good back and forth both ways on that one.
Yeah. Well, for me, I mean, I like a lot of different genres as a fan, so I do like playing with those. And it's not that I would get bored writing the same thing over and over, the same type of stuff, but it is every once in a while. I'm writing these mystery thrillers or thrillers, crime thrillers. It is every once in a while nice to get on a spaceship or have a superhero do something or something like that. It's fun.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it does allow it to be fresh for me.
Well, so I'm a music guy. I actually, it's funny. I just knocked my music down to a manageable pile, but I found all my old Linkin Park albums. So one of my favorite ones from them is called 1,000 Suns. It's their nuclear blast, nuclear holocaust concept album is what that is. It's different than any of the other albums they've done. right? But then I listened to the last, like the album they did afterwards, Living Things.
Right.
It's the best album they've done. My opinion, with Castle Glass, Powerless, Victimized, all the songs on there, they're so raw and fresh. And I think that break, right? You also get new tools in your toolbox too, trying something different,
Mm-hmm.
right? You realize, you learn some things. You learn some very valuable lessons, and you can take that stuff with you with the stuff you are more comfortable doing.
Right.
And suddenly it's a brand new thing
Mm-hmm.
all over again.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's, it allows you to refresh yourself, to try, to do, just to keep yourself going. Because with me, I mean, sometimes by the time I get to the middle of a novel, writing a novel, I need a break. It's not that I'm tired of the story or anything. It's just like my brain's just ready to do something else.
Yeah.
So let
And,
me hop over here and work on this and then
uh,
go back. And
I started drawing. I'm almost good. That's how I like to say this, is I'm almost good. Right. And no, I'm able to draw anatomy a lot better. I can kind of, I like, you can tell what I'm drawing now.
mm-hmm.
It's still not quite the details I want yet, but I'm going to say this here on here for the first time ever, Bobby. I'm a competent illustrator. I'm just going to
There
say
you go.
competent,
Yeah.
right? I'm not going to say, and I have to be conscious about it. I'm not like so good that I think that I'm the greatest thing ever, but people know what I'm drawing, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
fun. Which is kind of what kind of fun, and I never thought I'd get to that point, but
Right.
it also benefits my writing. It benefits everything else I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do a little art. I don't do a lot. I do a little. It's and it's part of it. It's part of the gig. It's part of the business model. I draw pictures on envelopes when people buy stuff from my store. It's a little bonus that some people buy stuff just to get the drawings.
Yeah, no,
And
I think it's cool. Like I wanna do something similar myself. I have
yeah,
to figure out it. So I have on my Patreon, I have a $20 tier. What I'm trying to figure out is I wanna make that a little bit better, because obviously when I make books and stuff like that, absolutely, and absolutely, Anita. I mean,
mm-hmm,
and I've been doing it now for a little while. Like I said, dare I say it? I'm gonna say this. I am consciously competent. Right. That's all I say. I'm consciously
mm-hmm.
confident.
Yeah,
It,
I'm at a point. I'm not ready to try to draw like a comic book or anything, but
I kind of am.
I can do I can do like sketches and stuff like that. So like when I do events, I do sketchbooks for the kids and things like that, and that's fun, and they get a kick out of that, and I get something out of doing sketches for kids too. That's just kind of that warm feeling, that
Well, it's fun. You're the highlight of their day, and
yeah.
it's a fantastic feeling, man. I mean, look, all right. I look at it like this. I am actually quietly doing not a traditional comic book or manga, but I am doing. I have a story with graphic novel elements that I am drawing in there. I gotta tell you, it's the scariest thing in my life I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. It's really, really hard. No one will ever say that's easy.
Yeah, it is writing comics is definitely a unique experience. And especially when you're working with people. I mean, if you're not doing everything, you're working with a penciler, a penciler, an inker, a letterer, a colorist, an editor. All of these things kind of have to go. You're involved with all of those processes, because not only is what you write important, where it gets placed on the page is important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like lettering and where the word balloons go is very important, and so everybody has a part in telling the story. So so a lot of what I write is not for the audience; it's for the artists.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of this is here. This needs to be this color. Here's why it needs to be this color. Or, oh, yeah, this is the bad guy. It's a surprise for the audience, but you need to know who it is. And there's a lot of that, why we're
Yeah.
doing it. And that the audience never actually sees that. They see the artist's interpretation of that. and then the artist brings their part, something to it that adds a layer. And so with each one, everybody's bringing their own unique kind of storytelling tricks to it.
So I have a story, a comic I wrote for a buddy. I wrote it about a year ago. The artist is finally drawing it now, and it's been fun going to back, seeing the backs and forths of it. Because he'll ask me questions too, because I wrote the script. It's like, what do you think about this and this? And sometimes I go, well, okay. And sometimes it's my own experience, right? I'll talk to him, right? Like the main character is like, would he wear any like protection? Because a lot of this takes place in the water. In the water, I'd be like, nah, he wouldn't. It's like, why? Because he lives here. There comes a point like okay, so again, we mentioned the minus 40 weather here. So I like if it's minus 10 or less, right? You'll see me in a hoodie, and that's pretty much all you'll see me in, because I'm used to it, right? It's not. So I go, okay, so he would be used to it. They may not be used to it, so they might wear a little extra layer or two to protect themselves, but he wouldn't. He would just be himself. He would be just chill. And it makes sense, right? It's just these little details that make sense, right? And they look at, and he goes, okay, yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, I got my own ideas, and I would come up with some really cool. I'm not gonna spoil anything else other than that, but
it is a very one of the coolest things about writing comics is seeing the art come in to my inbox and going, oh, that's really cool. I love this, right? Because it never looks how I imagined it in my head, but usually it's better.
Yeah, usually it is. Yes.
It's they have taken this idea that I've had and given it life, and a lot of times that motivates you too to make changes, because we can lose some of this dialogue because the art is conveying that. Adding more words would just muddy that up. So you can do things like that. There's a lot of stuff that the artist brings to it. The artists are not just, they're not just, oh, I'll draw what he said. They're adding storytelling with the art, and that's where it really comes alive, is when the words and the art really mesh together.
Yeah, no, I find the art, like most of the artists out there today are fantastic storytellers in their own right. They have an idea what works on the page already. So I find with my scripts, I'm a lot less. I have details, but I don't have a crap ton of them, because it's like, I'm like, you're probably going to come up with something better than what I would do anyway. So I give you the base gist of what the story needs to be told, what story absolutely needs to be there. But I'll give you the rest, because it's probably going to be better than what I did. And the reason I think about it like that now is ironically George Perez, because you've seen a George Perez comic, right?
Oh yeah.
So
I've been in a George Perez comic.
That's cool. That is cool. Which one?
I am in Crimson Plague #2. I am on a spaceship photographing decomposing bodies.
Oddly fitting. Oddly fitting. No, so I interviewed George years ago, and one of the things that I realized about him very quickly, and if I ever had to, like, if I realized, if I ever had the chance to write for him, I would not minimize. I would minimize what I expect, because he can't help himself. He just can't help himself. And when I met him, he was drawing Zatanna for the Comic League of Defense Fund. He get this look like, do I or don't I? You can see it in his face, right? He looks at me. This is how I introduced himself to me. Do you think Zatanna should have a top hat? And I'm like, I'm not telling George Perez anything. It's like, it is the first time in my life I went, what do you think, George?
Yeah.
And I'm like, because it's like, I do not deserve to answer this question.
Yeah.
So
and when artists are thinking, because they're thinking visually and things like, I'll give you a good example of one of mine. I wrote this scene where Domino Lady she takes place in the 30s, and so she's got her ear against the safe while she's got her hand, cracking the safe. And I just had it in one panel where we see her doing that, and she's, the narration tells you what she's doing. The artist Jordy went in and turned that one panel into 3 panels, and they're all fairly the same shot of her with just slight differences. So you can actually see her turn it. She's turning it, and then when there's a little smile when the last tumbler falls.
Yeah,
so it actually, more so than how I originally wrote it, really shows her skill and the passage of time,
and also her personality.
Her personality, because there's that little,
little grin. The little grin tells you everything you need to know about Domino Lady.
Yeah,
when it comes
and so
to crack.
right, and so your artists, the artists are adding those kind of touches, that that help inform the character, because if you're in a character's apartment, what kind of art's on the wall, things like that. How do they dress? How are they, moving about? And George was a master of characters in real moments, not just the superhero stuff, but
Oh no, he was underrated writer too.
Yeah.
He was underrated writer too.
Yeah. And just fantastic at adding those little details that you're not beating, because the best comic storytelling, you're not beating your audience over the head with these details. But when the writer and artist really gel, and you're really working as a team, you start putting things in to build on character, to build on things that might come up later in the story, so that it doesn't seem important in issue 1, but in issue 3 it becomes a real plot point. And so it doesn't come out of nowhere, because you guys have set this stuff up going forward.
Yeah. So comics, much like novels, is this way. It's all about the expectations you give the reader going into it. So sometimes, again, it's the details are everything. Honestly, the details are everything. You can put, I realize this, you can let anything happen in your story. And I mean anything. But you have to make a promise to the reader that you're going to pay this off, whatever you put in the book.
Yes, I mean, I like to play fair, because when I write mysteries, one of the things that just irks me about sometimes when I read a novel or a comic or watch a movie or a TV show where there's a mystery, and there's that one clue that the main character uses to solve the mystery, that we as the audience were not privy to that clue. And that feels like it's a cheat, because they pulled that clue out. I didn't have a chance to solve this because I did not see that clue.
It depends on how it's done. Like, for example, like if they show that there's a clue that exists that you're not seeing, I'm okay with it. Right? It can't be like, it can't come out of nowhere. That's the rule. It can't come out of nowhere. It has to be like, okay, there's reason to believe this was there all along.
Right. But see, I'm talking more like those where they've got a suspect and they're interrogating them, and they go, well, we know you did it. And they say, you have no proof. And they're like, oh yeah, we searched your house 10 minutes ago and we found this. Okay. The audience did not see that search.
That's cheating. That's actually, that's
what I'm talking about. That's not playing fair, because that's not giving your audience a chance to go, aha, Now the trick is to do it in a way that the clues are there, but they may miss them, or when the reveal happens, there's this aha moment for the the audience, the reader, who goes, that's what that meant,
or also here's the other thing. Sometimes the reader will get it. Sometimes the reader will figure it out before he should.
Right.
Okay, cool. Is the journey to finding the answer fun? Because if the journey is worthwhile, even if you know the answer, you'll just right. If you'll go along with.
Well, but you'll feel like, aha! I feel really good about myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. As long as it comes across intelligently, right? As long as it comes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was gonna say, one of one of the coolest compliments I had for my first novel, Evil Ways, was I was working at this job, and I went in that morning. I sat down at my desk, and the phone rings, and it's someone else in the building, and I answer, and she goes, "Okay, two things. I'm really tired this morning because I stayed up all night reading your damn book because I couldn't stop. And okay, and secondly, okay, explain this to me. I thought it was this guy." And so I'm going like, okay, here's where the clues are. And they're like, oh, so it was one of the greatest conversations because, you know, seeing,
Yeah.
hearing her go, oh, okay, now I know what that meant. I had forgotten about that. Or,
Yeah.
this red herring, really surprised, got me. And
Oh no.
because as a writer, to me, and I'm sure you run into this too, I know it's a clue. So to me, it's like everybody's going to get this, because it's almost like there's a neon sign pointing at it, going a clue. But then you realize later that you've hidden it kind of well. But I still, even if it's hidden, I want it to be fair so that the reader can go back and see it if they want to.
Yeah. No.
If they go, wait, okay, it's this guy. Wait. Oh, okay, they mentioned this, and they can go back and, oh, that's what that meant. Sorry, excuse me. And never fails. Put me on a podcast, and I will start belching like crazy.
No. It's okay.
It's some mental thing with me. I think I don't know.
It's nerves. It's also maybe it's because deep down you like me because you feel comfortable burping in front of me. It's like
I guess
take I'll take the love.
Yeah,
I'll take it as love.
yeah. It's one of those weird things. It never fails. Maybe it's because I'm talking so much and I don't talk a lot during my normal day. But yeah, it's just that's why I keep the water on hand.
No, it's all good.
And
So what I realize is, okay, it's basically, here's what you're saying. This is what I'm saying, where we both agree. You have to have it there,
mhm,
somewhere there, because if it's there, the audience can even if they don't. Okay, that's in a mystery. Let's say she was mad she didn't get it. She didn't feel cheated.
right,
This is the important thing. She didn't feel cheated that
right,
it was that person. She was like, how did I miss that? Like, she was
right,
like, how did I
exactly.
miss it? Right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because subconsciously, you gave her what she needed.
right,
She just guessed wrong. And
right,
that's okay. And that's okay.
yeah.
Right?
Right,
Even
and that's
like,
half the fun of it,
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
because and we had a nice discussion, and and she's like, what did I miss? And so that was cool. That kind of stuff is cool, and and you know, at the end of the day, when your book is out to the reader needs to feel like I know what I'm doing. I don't always know that in the writing process.
Yeah,
Um,
none of us do.
I've
None of
had
us do.
this. I've had it happen a couple of times where I'm almost at the end of a story, and something clicks where I realize, oh, that's not the bad guy. This is the bad guy. Here, I thought this was the bad guy. Okay, that's a great twist. We'll make that happen. Let me go back and put the clues in, and then surprise, surprise, the clues are already there
Mhm.
because the characters are oftentimes smarter than the guy writing them.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
I'm writing about my equivalent to a female version of Parker.
Hmm.
I know what the payoff in the book is. Now I'm trying to build my way to the payoff in the book because I'm in Act Two. Act One's written. Now I'm in
Right.
Act Two. So Act Two, it's like, okay, this is the quest part, but it's also a bit of an origin story as well. The quest / origin story part of this, and I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna have some fun because I but how can I do this in a way that's fun and fits the character and kind of fits the tone of where I'm going, but also when I get to the reveal at the end of the book, people go,
Hmm.
"Oh my god!" Right? Because you can lull people into a bit of a false sense of security. But I'm also going to be quiet. But again, this comes back to what you're saying. It's the expectations you put in the story.
Right.
It's all about those expectations. You have to have a degree of knowing. Okay, the audience is going to follow along because deep down we all subconsciously have a grasp of what story is. We all do.
Hmm.
And so we got to follow that line where people are a little bit familiar and comfortable. Now we can play with it. We can play with the reader. In fact, the reader wants us to play with them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't cheat them.
Right.
We can't, even if we're an unreliable narrator, because we can do that if we want to be. Even in that unreliability, there are certain rules we can't break.
Right.
If we break those rules, people are going to throw your book across the table, and not because they're like, oh, this scene really got. No, it's like, you ripped me off. I paid money, I got this far, and right.
Yeah. So playing fair is I like doing that, but I'm not an outliner. I can't outline that. Just my brain doesn't do it, because when I go to write it, I feel like I've already written that and I'm ready to move on.
So I do what is called an inside outline.
Okay.
So it has some plot stuff in there, some, not a lot, right? Because I get surprised as much. Like I said, if I told you, okay, I said like this about trying to find the Holy Grail, but I decided to do it in the silliest way I possibly could. Because I like I said, I really want to get people at the end. So I figure, let's have fun with this part of the story. Let's have fun with it. And but that all said, it's like that's not something I planned. That part I didn't plan. But the emotional beats of the story. What does my character care about? Where does she start? Where will she finish here?
Yeah, I usually go with just, I have beats I know I need to hit.
Yeah.
These things must happen in the story. Boom, boom, boom. I know those. So I have those.
Yeah.
So it's not like I go in with no plot.
No. I gotcha.
So I just can't do that whole outlining thing. But what I do is I go, okay, we're starting here. Plot point 1 is here. Okay. I tell my character, that's where we've got to go. And then I follow the character there. And that's where the spontaneity you were talking about comes in.
Oh, absolutely. No. And even with my outline, there's a lot of room for spontaneity. Yeah. And sometimes my character gives me the bird. We're going to go here. Like, no, we're not. No, we're not. It's like, we're not. No, we're going here.
I'll give you a non-spoilery example. In one of my book series, I won't tell you which one. In one of my book series, I had a character who I was setting up he's a bad guy in this book. Multiple books later, I plan on a big showdown. He's going to be like the recurring villain. 2 books later, we find him dead. This throws off a lot of the plans I had, but it just, in the moment of the story, it made the most sense for this character to be dead. Now, we don't know how they died. We just find them dead. So there's more of the story of finding out what happened. But it served a couple of purposes. It was a twist the readers did not see coming. Yeah, I didn't see it coming. But it also had the surprising effect of a secondary character who was not as important to the story or as originally planned, filled that villain role and turned out to be a better villain than the original villain.
Yeah.
So happens. A lot of great things came out of that. But if I had like committed myself to, I absolutely have to follow this outline, that twist would have happened, and I would have lost out on a better villain.
So, and it's as a hard outliner and plotter, my books always take surprising turns. It's like, yes, the best laid plans, and then suddenly you hear God laugh, and you're like, well, no, what did I do? What did I do now?
But now I have writer friends that are, they spend, their outlines are sometimes longer than some of my stories.
Yeah.
But they put everything into the outline. So when they go to write the book, they write the book quick.
Yeah.
And that works for them.
Oh, sure.
So it's different. Everybody finds their own rhythm of what works for them and what doesn't.
Totally.
Yeah, and because you as a creator need to be comfortable. If you feel like, oh, why am I doing this? God, I hate this. This is so hard, so miserable. You're going to be miserable. You're not going to put your best work out. So you have to find that that works for you. Yeah.
Yeah, because the important thing is you don't want your reader to have the same feelings you do. Like in that with that regard, you'd be like,
Yeah.
I hate myself at this point in the novel,
Yeah.
and then the reader, and because the reader will go, I hate myself at this point in the novel,
Yeah.
and I'm not, and the reader will not know why.
Yeah. If I'm bored, they're bored.
Yeah, exactly, and that's it, and that's something that's really, really that is required to be understood when you put a story together. Is yeah, you want to know where you. I like knowing where I'm supposed to go.
Hmm.
That's me. How I get there, I'm not as worried about,
Right.
right? When I'm writing the story, right? I can figure it out and I can tighten some things up. But one of the things, again, just dealing with writing in general, I realize a lot of it is about the emotional. Books are bridges to empathy. That's what I realized that. That's what they are.
Hmm.
They're empathy bridges. So understanding what I'm trying to convey and feel is a big part of what I do as a creative,
Hmm.
right? It's not just about what I'm trying to make you think. I'm trying to make you feel too something. But it can be as simple as this was fun. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. I think those are some of the best books.
Hmm.
But but sometimes you want people to cry. Sometimes you want people to smile. Sometimes you want people to get feelings of love. Sometimes you want to get feelings of murder. And I'm not just saying that because they need us here, right? But I mean, but you want people to feel
Right.
something reading this. So
Sure. And there are tricks is probably the wrong word, but there are things we can do as writers
yep,
to make those happen. I mean, in
absolutely.
all media. I mean, certainly movies and TV, you have a music cue that kind of can kick off an emotion.
Hmm.
In our books, we can have certain types of words or certain write it a certain way to evoke an emotion. We can also speed up how fast you read it or slow down how slow you read it by how do we put these sentences, short choppy sentences you tend to read faster. So when you get to an action scene, it's not big paragraphs like it is when it's a slow scene. And so you can do these things to kind of manipulate the
Absolutely.
storytelling.
Yeah, I had to put this up there because it made me smile. Hey, listen, Anita, as much as I joke, I enjoy your stories. They're really good.
Yeah.
They're really, really good.
Well, and I know Anita knows this as well too. A lot of what we can do too when we are writing these kind of scenes, there's also I don't have to be overly graphic. I can put it if you we can write it in a way where the reader fills in some of the blanks, which makes it even more,
I,
gruesome.
well, or I can go both ways. I wrote or last night about two of my characters being intimate, but I decided to do it. I decided to do it in a way without actually saying it. How could I
Right,
do this and have fun with it? Because the idea is when they're reading this particular scene, I want there to be a little bit of a blush feeling.
right.
But I realized, so why would I describe this in great detail? I don't even
Right.
have to do that.
Well, it's
Right?
yeah, it's almost like with we talked about Domino Lady earlier.
Mhm.
In the Domino Lady in the 30s was considered an adult book. It was one of the spicy materials that, they kept it in the back because she had sex. We never see the sex in the book. It's the equivalent of like, you know, uh I saw this one on TV the other night. Captain Kirk kisses an alien. The camera pans up to a lantern, and when it comes back down, he's sitting on the edge of the bed putting his boots on. We know what happened. We fill in the blanks, but you're not showing it in any kind of detail. I
You
mean,
don't
there are
need.
books that do that, and there's nothing wrong with it, but you know your audience, and so they can fill in a lot of those
Well,
gaps and
I, ju-
details.
I'm just going. I just go off, and this is something I just learned when I've dated women, right? The more graphic I get, right, they're into it to some degree, but
Hmm.
it's nowhere near as fun. But when I just put the idea
Right,
in right, it's way more fun. It's
right. It's
way
the
way
hints, the teases.
yeah.
You know,
That does goes a lot
yeah.
farther
This
than
character whispers something in that character's ear. You don't have to
yeah.
tell what it was. They're
No, you
gonna,
don't.
yeah, that kind of thing. Little things that you can just do And again, it works for the tender moments. It works for the gruesome moments. You
Yeah,
know.
it works for it. It can work for anything. The trick, again,
Mm.
what it really comes down to as a writer, what's the story you're trying to tell? Because that's the story you're trying to tell, right? That will dictate what's important in the
Right.
story.
Right. That's just like with movies, like Halloween. The original Halloween is considered a very terrifying, horrifying movie. There's no blood in that movie.
No,
You know, there might be a little on the knife, but that's about. I mean, we don't see these people getting pools of blood under. It's
you don't need
so.
to.
But your brain thinks, "Oh my God, this is the bloodiest movie ever,"
Yeah.
because they got stabbed. It's there. So.
So the author I'm going to mention is gets a lot of mixed reviews, but I think one of the best things he ever wrote was so Terry Goodkind, Wizard's First Rule, wrote about 100 pages of torture.
Mm-hmm.
He only had 3 actual acts of torture on the page.
Right.
The rest of it was just Richard's helplessness at the hands of this character.
Yeah.
And it was masterfully done. It made his editor uncomfortable. But then he went to his editor, okay, show me the scene you're uncomfortable. And the editor realized, holy shit, there's almost nothing here.
Yeah. It's
right?
a lot of the you get a lot of the internal what the character is feeling in that moment or what they're
Yeah.
thinking in that moment and the terror that they're feeling. You don't have to show it because they're expressing it. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's all about their actions, but
Mhm.
not the action that's making them do this. It's their actions that tell that story.
Yeah.
So that's what you got to work. That's what you got to deal with. It's not about what's done in front of it's not done. It's not the action in of itself. It's the
Mhm.
reaction
Right.
that
Right.
people
Absolutely.
right. That's the real secret. Now, sometimes you need to show the action. You can't
Right.
hide it forever because otherwise it'd just be a bunch of invisible whatever. But
you don't have to show necessarily every especially if you're killing a lot of people, you don't have to show every murder in every gruesome detail.
no,
You
no,
know.
I actually, the way so I mean, if you want to build a monster killer up, right? You don't show anything. You just go by hearsay and
Mhm.
rumor and legend because, again, we are still a superstitious, cowardly species at heart. So the thing is, wait, no one's seen them, no one's heard
Mhm.
from them, no one knows
Yeah.
anything. That is scary,
Yeah.
right? Whereas that's why for so many years the Joker was so terrifying. It wasn't that he was. I mean, he was a dude in clown makeup. I mean, that's not that scary, except you don't know who he is. You don't know how he got this way. Part of you wants to know, and part of you
Yeah.
doesn't, and you don't know what he's gonna do next.
Very unpredictable. Very unpredictable.
Right. So I actually I've been hating I've hated DC for the last few years. Like I don't want to see a Joker comic. I just don't. I don't think he's the one character that never should have a book.
Yeah. Well, they've certainly given him his fair share over the years.
Yeah. I just but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
He should never he's one of those characters that's better served in the shadows,
Yeah.
not so much in the light. Harley Quinn, you can go nuts. I think Harley Quinn's fantastic.
Mhm.
But the Joker, I don't want the Joker to have a series. I just don't because it's like part of the fun with him is you just don't know what he's going to do next.
Right.
Right. That's just me. And I think that's probably the other big difference between comics and prose. I think comics have to be much more deliberate with what they don't show
Mhm.
because the visuals are right there.
Right.
So it's
Well,
very
yeah. It can take your reader's imagination out of it because you're
yeah.
showing it.
Yeah, that's right. So you want to be very careful what you show, right?
Yeah.
There has
But
to be
then
a reason.
yeah, but then there's also things artists can do to heighten tension.
Absolutely.
Just like when in movies or TV where there are camera angles, the artist can do that where you want to heighten some tension, show the characters in the distance, but the point of view of the panel is it's like someone's looking at them from around a tree. Oh my God, they're being followed. What's going on? Who is it? You've put these subtle things. I
Absolutely.
mean, horror movies, the slasher movies got a ton of mileage out of that.
Well,
Seeing everything from the killer's point of view, Not even seeing the killer, just they're watching around a tree, or they're looking at them through a fence or whatever. And
Sometimes less is indeed more, right? Sometimes
yeah,
less.
I mean,
Sometimes,
hey,
yeah.
one of my favorite movies, totally Jaws. Had that shark worked like they wanted it to, I don't think the movie would have been as good as it is, because not seeing the shark made the shark scarier.
Yes.
And I think it was one of those happy accidents, because had their mechanical shark worked, we would have seen the shark a lot. Like that first kill, that lady, the skinny dipper dying. Originally that was supposed to be, you see the shark gets her. That would have killed all the anticipation and the suspense that we end up with in the finished product, because we don't know what it's going to look like until I mean, we all know what a shark looks like, but we
But it's
haven't seen it.
also done and would not have the
Hmm.
same impact at all, right?
Right.
Right. So no, I mean that's the thing, right? You hide the monsters, you hide. Comics play with time, and you got to make a decision about what you
Hmm.
see versus what you don't.
Right.
Right. Prose doesn't play with time the same way. It does,
Right.
but it's not the primary tool of prose. Prose,
Right.
it's
Right. Because with comics or movies, TV,
yeah,
they kind of work similar in a lot of
yeah,
ways.
oh yeah.
In movies, you can have a jump scare.
Hmm.
The killer leaps out of the bushes. The dinosaur comes through the. Your audience does that. That's harder to do in books, but with comics, because it's art, you plan for what's on what page number. If you want a jump scare in a comic, it's got to be on an even numbered page, because even numbered pages are on the left. So
Hmm.
you turn the page and there's the dinosaur.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if page 3 is the setup to that, you turn the page, there's the payoff. If the setup is on page 2 and the surprise is on page 3, while you're reading the setup, you can already see the art, so
Yes.
there's no surprise. So those are some of the technical things that we end up doing in comics to make sure those things can happen. Yeah, in a novel, it's a little different, because you're not looking at you don't see the jump scare in the words on the next page, so they're
No,
not as important of where you put them.
no,
But then
because
you
again,
have to be yeah, you have to
the
be
image is in your head, so
right,
you don't know. You don't have to worry about them. Now, if they jump ahead on their own, well, that's their choice,
that's
right?
their
You get
choice. Yeah,
your
yeah.
right,
And then
but
and then you come up with clever ways to do it. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a cliche thing now, so I'm not saying don't do this, but what's the old of suddenly a shot rang out, you
Well,
know.
you can still do it. Like you can still do it. It's just the thing is you got to be. This goes back to something I said about spontaneity in real life. Shit happens in real life, right?
Hmm.
So you can. I have known of a few author here and there that will do a D&D campaign with their characters, and somewhere along the way they roll a critical fail or a critical success, right? And if they say, well, it's okay, this is kind of strange,
Hmm.
right? But at the same time, this is actually kind of neat. Let's play with it. How does this
Right.
fit with the story I'm doing?
Well, I was just thinking, you don't use the actual phrase "suddenly a shot rang out," because
No, you don't. No, you don't.
your editors will smack you down. You have to come up with a more clever way to
Well,
do it.
actually,
But
you know what? Unless the whole point of the book is to be bad on purpose, in which case
well,
you
yeah,
do everything badly,
well, sure.
everything.
But then that's a trope that you're doing it on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And no,
Yeah,
and as long as the audience knows you're doing it on
yeah,
purpose, they will play with you. They're
right.
like,
That's
okay,
like
fuck it.
yeah, that's like avoiding cliches. You try to avoid cliches unless the point of it is you're drawing attention to the fact that it's a cliche.
And that's
You
sometimes
know.
the difference between comedy and drama, folks.
Yes.
Drama is a little bit more unpredictable. Comedy
Hmm.
is almost refreshingly predictable. It's
Yeah.
like, it's like,
Yeah, so those are the kind of things that you just learn as you're doing it, and really a lot of it's practice and people going that doesn't work or that works, or and as like Anita mentioned earlier, she has beta readers, cheering one of her stories. Having that extra set of eyes
helps.
helps, because we as creators can get into a little bit of tunnel vision. We
Absolutely.
understand what the story is, and so our brain is filling in parts we forgot to type. Or at least to me, it happens
No,
to
no,
me.
it happens to me
And
too. No, 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 no.
yeah,
This is
and so
this.
it's like somebody goes, "Wait, what's this?" I'm like, "Oh, well, this is this." It's like, well, you didn't put that anywhere in the story, and I'm like, "Oh, I should probably do it," that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Because our brain is filling in those gaps, much like the reader's brain will fill in a lot of the gaps when they're reading it. So yeah, those are fun things to play with, but they're also on the writing side of it. They're traps to be careful to avoid.
again, but do keep in mind, folks, if you are having fun with the story, chances are readers
Mm,
will too.
yeah,
So, I mean, you can get away with a lot if the passion's there. You can
sure.
get away with absolutely a lot. Not everything. Like
Yeah.
maybe you should.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
but
and a lot of it work depends on who you're doing the book for.
mhm.
If you're working for a publisher, they have guidelines and rules and all that stuff you need to know going in. I can't do a certain thing. This is, who's your audience? If you're
Mhm.
writing a book for teenagers, probably don't want to show a lot of sex, not graphic,
Yeah, not
um,
graphic stuff.
yeah, you're not writing young adult erotica,
Yeah, no, no,
that kind of thing. So
yeah.
knowing your audience helps, who am I writing this for? What age group am I shooting for? That also determines language, how much violence. Violence tends to be is okay, but language, if you're going to plan to drop a bunch of f bombs, okay, then you need to be writing a story aimed at a
Adults.
certain age group.
Yeah, at least adults. Yeah.
Yeah. So things like that. So you have to kind of know those things. And working for publishers, that you know what they will and won't take. Um, and it doesn't mean it's bad.
No.
The things they'll ask you to cut out, but it's just that's not our company brand.
Well, you have to understand again. This you mentioned this. I'll just highlight this. You have to know who you're working for, and you have to
Hmm.
understand that like they have their own audience they have to serve,
Yep.
and that is the bottom line. And you know what? It works for them. They're in
Yep.
business, so you can't if you're going to work with a publisher. Now that doesn't mean you can't compromise a little bit. It can
Well,
like
there's negotiation, sure.
yeah, absolutely, like right because again the publisher wants you to be happy with what they're delivering too because if all goes well they want you to come back,
Hmm.
right? And that's kind of the whole gist of it. You have to figure out, you have to again, something I said earlier. I mentioned like I'm writing a blog for a client. I'm not particularly sure about the tone of the tone. That all said, it's his blog, right?
Hmm.
I'll go with it if that's what they want. I just pointed out the my concerns,
Right.
which is my job to do, and vice versa. When you're dealing with a publisher, they're like, well, we need you to change this, and then you go to them, but what about this?
Yeah.
And and
Or
and
yeah.
they're like,
Why did you do it this way? Yeah. Here's what
yeah,
I was thinking.
yeah, exactly. And the thing is, suddenly now it's a collaboration to figure out what works
Mhm.
best for everybody involved, right?
And
And that works.
yeah, and it's also, I mean, these are also things you need to think of if you're going to self-publish. If you're going to be your own boss, you have to know you have more freedom to do what you want, but know what you want. If you're going to say you're going to write I don't know, say you're going to write something aimed at all ages or young adults.
Okay, sure.
You don't, know your audience, know what you can write for them. And if you're doing a series, but all of a sudden book 3 can't be for adults only, and then book 4 goes back to being young adult, you've got to, you have to kind of, excuse me, you have to keep it consistent for the audience.
Yeah,
You don't lose your audience.
or at least or do what Rowling did, which was I'm going to grow up the story as it evolves little by little.
Well, sure, but I mean, but yeah, but then she didn't in the next book go back.
No, no, no,
Yeah,
she never did.
that's the thing. So, where it's like, book 4 can't suddenly be this very different thing, and then expect to go back to what book 3 was in book 5. You have to, as a publisher or a writer yourself, if you're doing it yourself, you still have to think like a publisher. You have to think, who is my audience? What audience am I trying to reach? How am I going to reach them? What is the best method of reaching them? Because there's a lot of ways to get stories to an audience. And you have to think of all that stuff. And it's like,
Absolutely.
you know, and like I do these novella series, and I'm conscious of things like they all need to be roughly the same size, because I'd hate to do book 1, 2, and 3 are going to cost you $8.99. Book 4 is going to cost you $15 because it's double the size, and
Yeah.
then we're going to go back to $8.99. I can't do that. My readers will abandon me at book 4, because how dare you? You know. So you have to think of business things with that creativity, and know what you're doing, and know who your audience is, what kind of books you're doing, and that kind of stuff. It's very important to know.
And ultimately, folks, I mean, if you're not sure, trust stuff, but you could, but be prepared to lose on the investment, because you're
Hmm.
probably, again, figuring stuff out usually takes time. It just does, and there's no
Hmm.
way around it. And but I mean, but in the process, like, you'll find out stuff. Like, for example, I wrote an epic poem with Alice in Wonderland and Greek mythology. So my audience is probably going to be kids in college and theater
Hmm.
people. That's my audience. So anything I do in terms of a physical release is going to have them in mind.
Right.
Notice, folks, I did not say anything about bookstores.
Right.
Right.
No. As an
Right.
indie creator, yeah, aim for the readers. Bookstores are that's yeah, that should not be your first.
Or last,
Yeah.
even your last. It's there. I mean, if the opportunities there, great,
Yeah.
but treat it
There
like,
are some very indie friendly local stores that
sure,
will come up and go, "Hey, I want some books in the store. What can we do?" But for the most part, I'm my outreach, my promotion, my trying to get the word out is aimed directly at readers. So I'm
absolutely.
always on the lookout for readers who are reading the kind of stuff that I write.
Well,
If it's available to the bookstore, because I always tell people this: look, if you get a discount at Barnes and Noble, they'll order it for you. I go, with my blessing. It doesn't hurt me one bit. If you get a discount, go get it that way. But I'm not promoting to Barnes and Noble, because they're never going to stop my books as an indie creator.
yeah, but also at the same token, what I'd be doing in your position too is offering the benefits. Like, for example, as simple as it is, you drawing little pictures on envelopes as a thank you, right? That, again, those little bits. I go like this, and sometimes people disagree with me. We're in the customer service industry, whether we realize it or not. And the key word in that is service,
Mm.
right? We are creating a product for people to enjoy. So anything we can do to add to the enjoyment is going to be a huge advantage.
Right. Because where I don't promote to bookstores expecting them to stock my
No,
stuff, I
no,
do reach out to bookstores to do signings, to
yes,
do events. I'll go out and um, do a Q&A session, or teach a panel, sell some books. And then in those cases, the stores do take a cut. But, so it technically is in the bookstore. The bookstore's making money off those. But that's how. So bookstores are not completely out of my realm
no,
of
but
promotion, but they're not my main source of
they're
promotion.
not your target. They're not
Right.
your real target. Your target are your readers,
Right.
whoever they are, and that's important. And like, I've talked to other authors on the podcast, right? This, and I mentioned this earlier. This is where indies can be potentially very lucrative, because if you're dealing, again, if you don't care about the awards that come with sometimes with the industry, and you're just worried about making a living, you can do very well on your own. You can build an audience up, and as you have done, leverage it into actual publishers going, "Oh shit, Bobby does this thing.
Hmm.
That's awesome." Right? And
Yeah.
you're like, "That's right. I do this thing for money."
Yeah. Yeah. And there are examples of people. This is one of the rare ones. But remember that movie, The Martian?
Mhm.
Well, it was originally a guy's self-published book. He wrote this book. He shopped it around. No publisher was interested. He self-published it. Somehow, it got in the hands of someone in the industry who says this is a movie. They then contacted the guy, made the deal with him to get the movie going. It gets announced that this book is going to be made into a movie. Now these publishers that wouldn't give him the time of day are calling him up, going and throwing money at him so they can release it to a wider audience. And
Yep.
Good for him. But it's just one of those things that sometimes you can't wait on that. You can't wait on a big publisher or someone to getting the work out. You can't sell a book that's not published.
So
You
so
can't
going
promote a book that's not, well, you can promote a little, but it's hard to get people to buy a book that doesn't exist yet.
well. Okay, I'm not going to say a full pushback on this. This is what I will say. If you have a finished book and you have a track record, it's a little easier to do because you're Bobby Nash.
No, but you can't sell a reader a book that's not published.
No, unless it's like a month or two, you're pre-ordering a book that's about ready to be come out.
Right, but
Come out.
right, but you're not, they still can't buy it until it's published. They can pre-order it, but they don't get it till it's published.
Yeah, that's right.
And
They
so
don't
if
get
if you're just sitting on it waiting for a publisher to find you, that book may sit on a shelf. Evil Ways, my very first published novel. I wrote the first draft in 6 months, and it took me 6 years to sell it. I tweaked it and worked on it over the course of 6 years before I found a publisher that would take a chance on it. And it turned out to be a horrible, horrible publisher, a terrible experience, but I had a book. And that book led to other work because I was able to use that as my resume. Oh, what have you done? Oh, I've done this book. Here's a book. Oh, and there's a book that tells a publisher he finishes things. Someone published this. It's in my hand. I have I can get that sense of what a book from him looks like. So those are the kind of things that kind of come from that, from sometimes doing even though that wasn't a self-published thing, but had self-publishing been more of a ready thing when I sold this book, I probably wouldn't have waited 6 years to find a publisher. I would have probably just put it out myself. And
sure.
so those are, getting a book out there, having a book in hand that you can point to. And somebody says, "Oh, what have you written?" And you can say, "I wrote that," and you point to it. That gives you, as a creator, a little bit of credibility. Because I've talked to many editors, especially early in my career, where it's like, "Well, what have you written?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm working on my first novel," and you can see them lose interest. You can see the glaze go over their eyes.
Well, so like I said, the last one, it really comes down to, it depends, right? It depends on how you do it. I've learned, this is what I've learned with publishers, right? Are you working on a book? I'm not going to say my first book, a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But then they're going to ask you, "Well, what have you done?"
Yeah, and then I'm going to say I've done, well, in my case, I could say I've done all of this stuff,
Sure,
right?
but I'm talking about people that are starting.
So what I was so for people starting, I say but even then I'm working on it now. Would you like to hear my pitch?
And they're going to say no.
But they're probably well, sometimes there is a. So I'm going to tell you how I almost got an agent. I'm going to make you laugh, because this is what I did. I decided to do it this way. I was sneaky because I knew I went like you said, a direct pitch, that I was going to get shot down. So I went like this. So to this agent I went to. So listen, how would I go about pitching to an agent? This is kind of what I'm working with. And then I just very quietly just pitched the book right there. Right. And the way I did it, it's like, what would you change? What would you recommend? Because suddenly I decided that if I can't get into the door right away, I can at least create the impression that I can be worked with and coachable even at the beginning.
Sure.
Because at that point, publishers will work with diamonds in the rough. They will, if they see that there's actual potential there. But if they can't see it in the quality of work, they can see it in the quality of character. So what I mean by that is, if you're going out there and you're being humble, you're asking questions, you are seeking answers honestly, not like in this bull. I snuck it in, but I was also legitimately looking for answers too, or else this would not have worked, right? But the idea is, now I'm showing I can be worked on. I can be coachable. I am willing to work. I'm willing to learn. That it may not open the door that day, but if I say I finished a book, sometimes it does open the door to at least say, okay, let's see what you got.
Right. But again, that's the thing. You have to have something to show them.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. When you're just like, oh, well, I'm working on coming up with a plot for my first book. You're not that. You've got to have something to show.
Yeah.
Before you start going to publishers and agents and editors. Don't take them. Oh, I've got an idea. That doesn't work. Don't. And please, if you do NaNoWriMo, do not send that thing you wrote in 1 month. That is your first draft. You need to now work on it to get it ready for print. Publishers get inundated in December with a bunch of first drafts, and that does not look well on you as the writer sending it in. So remember, that's your first draft. That's not, yes, you wrote it in 30 days, you finished it. That's awesome. It's an accomplishment. I don't want to take that away from anybody, but that book is not print ready.
It's a functioning car, and by functioning, I mean it's a 1970 Dodge at this point. Right. And you can turn it into a Ferrari. It is possible, but don't submit it because it might.
And that's a big thing. It's like you have to, know when it's ready to go. Because publishers get throughout the year, they're inundated with book proposals and pitches and whatnot. And, there's only a very small amount of books they're going to publish. So being rejected happens most of them. Most of it, I mean, I've got enough. I could paper my office with rejection letters I've gotten over the years. And it doesn't always mean your story's not good. It could just mean it's not for us. It could mean I got somebody that pitched the exact same plot and they beat you to the punch. It could be any number of things. It could be it's a good idea. It's a good start, but it's not ready.
I think my favorite one, so I'll tell you one of my favorite rejections that happened to me. It ended up working out in my favor. Second, I can't really argue about it long term. I was requested to submit a poem to a Lewis Carroll anthology. The Alice in Wonderland Greek mythology thing I told you about is what I submitted. I made it to the second or third round of rejections, but she told me there's just too many Alice stories, and some of them have bigger names than you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a business, right? Yep. It wasn't that the story was bad. Quite the contrary. The story was good. It was just right. It's timing. I think the other thing that I think a lot of authors need to understand too, timing is everything. Yep. It really, really is. Right place, right time. I've told the story many times. I accidentally got traditionally published the first time. So, I mean, it wasn't like I was just right place, right time. Everything just kind of the stars aligned and it came out. It worked out. And I still get a ton of rejections.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That's what happened. It happens to me. I've been doing this a long time and I still get them.
Yeah. Now, there might be a little nicer. They might say Mr. Nash instead of Dear Writer number 2306. Right? Yeah. But
one of the things I will say about I've been doing this long enough that a lot of times, yes, I don't get form letters quite like I used to. There is a conversation that happens, And so that is nicer. I mean, I remember those days of Dear insert name, where they didn't even bother to insert name. It was just Dear insert name. And you get this, and there's a list of reasons that it was probably rejected, and they checked one of them.
Nice.
So, I get it. Like I said, I've been there. But sometimes you'll get a nice note. Like they took a minute to go, here's what we liked and what we didn't like, or here's why we rejected it, or we liked this element, but we've already got a story similar to this in the works. That happens a lot. There's I've lost out on some media tie-in stuff because we've already got a story that's got a similar plot, or it's a sci-fi. We've already got a time travel story. Sorry.
Yeah, it's part of the business. Again, timing is a big part of it.
So
and and I think that's the thing. Like a competent story is like a drink of cold water in a desert sometimes from some of these publishers. They
Mm,
like them. They don't always want to say no to the thing. I think that's the most important thing about rejection that needs to be
mm-hmm.
understood. They don't always say no to things they want to say no to.
Right.
Right. But
Well, and
here's a
yeah, I mean, because it is. I mean, there's, yeah, for an anthology that's got 10 slots open, they probably get a couple of hundred. You know, they're going to turn down stories that they like just because. You know,
yeah, for just a whole bunch of different reasons.
yeah,
Right. Now I would go so far as to say that maybe there's only 20 good stories in that 200. Right.
it's possible too.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Right.
but there's any number of things that could make a publisher choose something. Like you said, someone more well known.
Hmm.
A well known writer sells more copies.
Hmm.
Totally understand that. Um, we've already got someone who's doing, especially when I do anthologies. This is kind of my way of thinking. Okay, I know other people are pitching to this same anthology. The first 5 ideas I get, I throw away because if they came to me easy, somebody else has already pitched that, and that has worked for me. Still, sometimes you do it and they go, "No, I've already got that." So, but the thing is you just, as a for me, what has happened with me over the years, I have developed relationships with
Hmm.
publishers in doing work for them, or even publishers I have never worked for. I still get to know them. I've met them at cons or doing panels or doing whatever, or there's something we've met some way. And so I have those built up those, and that's where what you were talking about, the getting out, the meeting people, the branding, the talking, you get to make relationships.
Hmm.
And sometimes though it'll come up and go, "Hey, we need this. Are you interested?" And so now I get invited to a lot as opposed to me
Yeah.
cold pitching, which is, it's less nerve wracking to be
But
invited.
you already got
But
the biggest obstacle out of the way. They
right,
want you. They
right,
want
and
you.
and you hope that because they know you, they know that you've built up your reputation. Your reputation becomes very important. Will he finish the story? Yes. Will he meet the deadline? Yes. Is he easy to work with, or is he a pain in the ass? That can make the difference.
Oh,
You could be the
absolutely.
greatest writer in the world, but my God, if you're hard to work with, they might just go to somebody else. I mean, so
Yeah.
there are exceptions to that depending on how your net, how many sales
If
you're
you
going to
draw
come
if you
because you
draw a certain amount of money, they'll look the other way a little bit, but
right,
they'll hate
but
themselves just a touch, but they'll do it.
right,
Right.
but so those are things that especially as a new writer, as you're getting into it, or early in your career, or I mean, hell, even later in your career, your reputation is your resume. Your reputation and your published output is your resume. There are any number of things that can get you hired or not hired. I remember once I was invited to be part of an anthology book, and I was the editor when he made the offer said, "You're in the book. You're guaranteed a spot." I mean, I still had to do a story that they liked, but if they didn't, they would allow me to pitch another one. I was guaranteed a spot, and I said, just out of curiosity, why?
Hmm.
And the editor goes, "Because I know you will promote the book, and I have 5 slots in this book where I am personally picking 5 people that I know will promote this book,
Hmm.
and they're getting spots." So those are the bits of your reputation that sometimes allows you to get work.
Yeah.
Another
Hmm.
one is like, "Bobby, I need something quick. Can you work a short story in by this?" You know,
Yeah.
sure. So I've built those kind of relationships, which helps. But
I,
again, it's one of those things. It's you still have to doing the work gets you there.
yeah. No, it actually happened to me last year. I did my first short story ever because Guy was doing a little zine. So I
Hmm.
got not only my first short story published ever, my first illustration published ever.
Yeah.
And it was just I was free and I had the opportunity and I could do it quick.
Yeah.
I, re-
And
I,
and now the opportunity, should they ever need something else, if oh, we've worked with Josh before, we know what he can do. Great,
yeah,
here's what we need. So you've built that relationship with them.
absolutely.
So now you're not an unknown anymore. You're
No,
like, we know
at least
what
to
you
me.
can do. Yeah. And so they can go, you know who would be great for this? Call Josh. He would be great for this. And so yeah, you're building that, that kind of, that's very much a part of the branding of yourself as a creator,
Absolutely.
and then, so because especially if you're gonna try to work for publishers, you know, um, I do some media tie-in stuff where I get to write, characters like Zorro or, whatever. And the Kolchak, those things are fun. Doing those allows me to then, when other people are doing media tie-ins, they go, "Oh, we've seen you've done a few of these. Would you like to pitch something?" Because those types of books there's a little more to them than, it's not just pitching something you own. You have to pitch a story that fits the characters, doesn't violate anything that's done. And so you have to pitch it, the publisher and editor approve it, but the people that own the character have to approve it.
Mhm.
Because say you're writing a Zorro story and they're like, well, we have this TV show coming. That plot's already in the TV show. Can't do that. That kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
You want to do Kolchak. Well, we've already got that story's been done. You can't do that. So there's a lot of that. And so knowing those type of things for people that do tie, that's why you see a lot of the same names doing tie-in novels. That's why there's only the same people are writing Star Trek novels over and over again. It's because they know what they already come into it knowing what they can and can't do. So that's easier on the rights holder. It's easier on the publisher and the editor because they don't have to go, okay, you can't do that. You can't, those writers have demonstrated that they know how to write in that world. And so it's easier to bring them back, you know.
And the most important thing I think you mentioned in there is that, again, everybody's invested in their property.
Hmm.
So the thing is that they're going to want to make sure that whoever gets the keys to the car isn't going to crash the car into a
No.
zillion pieces.
Right. Because,
Right.
because I'm sure you do this too. You meet people, especially at conventions or the comic shop, and it's like, man, I'm going to write, if I ever get to write Spider-Man, I'm finally going to do Spider-Man right. I'm going to do this, and you're sitting there thinking, no, Disney and Marvel are not going to let you kill Spider-Man. They're not going to let you, they're not going to let you do this. They're not going to let you do that. You still have to protect the brand, the IP. They are not going to let you all of a sudden, I don't know, make him lose an arm unless you can find a way for that arm to magically regrow by the end of the story.
Yeah, or yeah, the thing you got to understand about characters like Zorro, Spider-Man, Superman, Wonder Woman, you name it, right? They are an idea that's pretty solidified. Bruce
Yep.
Wayne is always going to be Batman, by and large,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's going to be moments where he's not, but by and
But
large,
eventually.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you got to accept, like, those things you have to accept. Now we can make an argument, a discussion for another day, is maybe there should be act threes with some of these characters. I actually think there should be in some cases,
But
but
as
but
long as
but
they are corporate owned characters, they will need.
no, exactly, no. I get that. Again, this is the nature of the beast. Understanding the nature of the beast, where the creative isn't always necessarily the best creative solution isn't always necessarily the best
Right.
business solution, and that's something that has to be understood when you deal with any kind of IP character. So like I said, the comic script I wrote was for somebody else's IP,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like, okay, let's do something fun, because I only had 8 pages. So what if I do this story and this story? My publisher looked at me and goes, "Oh man, I'm glad somebody finally took a crack at this character." It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's no problem. Right? It just looked interesting, and I had a story in my head with the 3 characters I chose. Like, this is what I kind of feel would happen if they met. So now, again, it fit the story, it fit the characters. I told the story. It's fun. It's well, right? But again, I knew going in that I wasn't killing the character. I wasn't
Right.
going to make any life altering changes to the character. because that's not my place to do it. That is
Right.
something, right? And that's not my job. My job is to tell a compelling story in
Yeah.
the space I'm given. That's it. And so I have to treat the property with respect, whatever
Yeah.
that property is. And like I'm a big fan of Tarzan and John Carter and Mars. I would love to do something with them, but I also know this too. They're going to be looking at me. It's like, who are you, and what are you going to do with my character? It's like
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to have some fun. I promise. I'm not going to do anything that compromises Tarzan,
Mhm.
right? And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, and they'll be like, prove it. What do you got?
Yeah. I like to tell people when they ask about writing media tie-ins, I use Star Trek as an example.
Mhm.
Star Trek starts out, the crew is on the bridge of the Enterprise, life is good, they're happy, shit happens. The end of the episode, they solve the problem, deal with the problem, solve the problem. End of the episode, they're on the bridge of the Enterprise, smiling, happy, going off to the next adventure. Between the two pieces of them on the bridge of the Enterprise at the beginning and end, Spock can die, but Spock needs to be alive at the end of the episode. You know, like there's an episode Spock gets his brain removed. You know, the end of the episode, he's still on the bridge, just like he was. You can't break the toys. You
Yep.
can play with them, but you can't break them.
That's exactly
You
it.
know, and that's media tie-in writing. You're writing the TV episodes that go standalone episode. You are not writing the movie where they blow up the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Somebody else is doing that. You know, if if Tarzan is going to get married and have a kid, that's going to be because the publisher is ready for that to happen, or the
Mhm.
license owner. They're not going to be People like me are not going to be pitching that because
Yeah. And,
that's a life altering change of status quo.
and, and going back to the ERB Tarzan, right? It's like, okay, so if I made that bitch, it's like, who's he marrying? It's not Jane. It's like, okay, back the truck up. Why
Yeah,
isn't it Jane?
yeah,
Right? And that's it. And it dies right there. And it's true. Like if you look at every property, there are just certain parts of the story that naturally just fit together, and you can't touch them, and you
hmm
have to accept it. If you can, but if you can do some really cool shit with all these characters.
right, right. Because there are certain characters that are just you know, Sherlock Holmes is always going to have a Watson involved. Tarzan and Jane. These are characters that you expect to be, excuse me, part of these properties. And so knowing that going in, you know what you can and can't. You have an idea. I know I can't kill Tarzan. Tarzan can't lose an arm. And suddenly he's a one-armed guy unless I can find some magical way to undo that at the end of the story. And then you have to be really good at making that happen, fixing that problem. So those are the kind of things that it adds an extra layer to it. I think as a writer, it challenges me as a writer because I already know, oh, I can't do this. Okay, how do I do what I want to do without breaking the rule that they
Mhm.
have? What kind of story can I do? How can I do this? What can I? And so you kind of it challenges you to come up with a story within those guidelines of what you can and can't do. And it can be tricky, but when you do something they like, that's wonderful. You do something the audience likes, that's even better.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, so knowing the characters, I certainly this will say most of the time I work on characters I have some passing familiarity with. Other times it's like the old thing where they ask an actor, "Can you ride a horse?" And the actor always says yes, whether they can or not. Would you like to write X?
Mhm.
Absolutely. And then you go, shit, I've never heard of X. You know, Amazon, send me something. I remember my first professional comic book. This is probably something I shouldn't tell, but my first professional comic book I was scripting a book called Demon Slayer. It had been published by Image, and it was moving to another publisher, and the scripter had left, and so they needed a new one. The artist owned the character, so he was plotting it and script and drawing it, but he needed a writer to flesh out the plot.
Sure.
And so I get this call It's like, would you be interested? Absolutely. I've never heard of this book. Now, this was in the 90s, so
Mhm.
Amazon wasn't really an option. As soon as I got off the phone, hopped in my car, and I spent the next 4 hours driving to various comic book stores looking for back issues, and I found most of them. But it was enough that when I talked to them again a few days later, I had an understanding of the character.
I'm going to tell you. So it's not quite the same thing because Alice, as Alice in Wonderland, is a public domain character at this point.
Right?
So
But you
I
have
can tell
to
you,
but you have to be careful. You can't use, even though Alice movies are not.
no, absolutely,
So the
no,
things that are created for the movies you can't use.
no,
Yeah.
no. So okay. So I pitched the that Lewis and Carroll anthology I told you about.
Mhm.
I was like, what the hell can I say about Lewis Carroll that hasn't been said? Because I said yes. And then I had a moment's thoughts like, what the fuck do I say about Lewis Carroll? And this is just an honest truth.
Mhm.
And then I go to the bar. I meet a girl with a Gorgon tattoo. I've told this story many times before. But the important thing is I had this epiphany right there in the bar. Oh my gosh, Alice and Pandora are the same story.
Mhm.
I had something. I
Right.
had something at that point. It's like I knew I had something. So now it's about telling the best story I can.
Right.
So I figured that out. I figured that all out. And suddenly it was like, okay, I have something that could off the races. She liked that again. She ended up cutting it at the very end because, again, just Alice is a very popular character,
Right.
right? So, but it was like, oh my gosh, this works. And I've done my own stuff with it since. So I'm working on the second
Mhm.
book right now, and I might have an illustrator for that for the second book now. So that's good. But all of which to say is like IP is very interesting because once they I think the last and final challenge why they are so protective of their IPs is consciously or not, people have an idea what to expect from these
Mhm.
characters.
Well, and
If you mess around with them, you can wreck that perception. And they've
yeah,
worked very hard to cultivate what perceptions they have.
yeah, and sometimes it does become difficult because the audience does not make that separation of, like, I wrote something that hasn't come out yet, but I wrote something that takes place in Oz. Oz is public domain. The characters in the first book are public domain. Some of the characters in the movies are not. You know, there are things in Sherlock Holmes that are public domain.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that have been created in Sherlock Holmes movies that are not.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes when you get the license, and licenses are different. Like, I worked on Green Hornet. There are multiple licenses for Green Hornet. There is the radio show and the TV show, which were the same license. Then there's the comic, and then there was a different comic with a different where it was a different Kato, one with Kato's daughter. So there were three or four different licenses for different versions of it. So what I was hired for, we're doing the 60s TV show. So everything I wrote had to fit
Mm-hmm.
in that. So I couldn't use characters that did not come from the 60s TV show. Then again, people in the comics couldn't use characters that were created just for the TV show.
Absolutely.
But what happens is your audience doesn't isn't thinking that. Their audience is thinking, I know the Green Hornet. Why aren't you using these characters? So it's a fine line you have to walk with in
Yeah.
terms of, vampires. My God, how many different vampire lores have been created over the years? And not all of them. Dracula is public domain, but most of the Dracula movies are not. And there are some stuff that gets created just in those movies. And so you
Mm-hmm.
have to know what you can and can't get away with.
Yeah, and that can be that can break your brain a little bit
Hmm.
too. A little bit sometimes, like, can I do this? And they're like, no, you can't. Can I do this? No, and they're crying a little bit too. No, you can't. I'm
Right.
sorry. Right? Can I do this?
Yeah.
Right?
Because it is it is a thing we have to play with. Um,
Yeah.
where you have to know, and again, your publisher and the license owner will tell you that too. It's like, we don't want this, you know. and we don't want that. We don't want this. We don't want that. We have to have this. You know, if I'm writing the Green Hornet and we're doing the TV version, there's certain things that have to be in every episode, a story, because they're in every episode. Like Let's Roll Cato and the car going, the gate opening and the car coming out. Those things are there because they're in every episode of the show. So those are the kind of things you have to kind of know, you know,
Yeah.
what you can do, what you can't do. But I also say this: you can have a ton of fun playing with these characters, especially characters you grew up, you know, watching or reading, you know.
Absolutely.
And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to write Kolchak the Night Stalker. You know what? That's awesome. I can't believe I got to write the Lone Ranger. Oh my God, that's awesome. You know, that kind of stuff. It's so
And
there is a coolness, fun factor that goes with it. And it also, from a writing standpoint, there's a built-in audience for those characters.
absolutely.
And your hope is they'll like what you've done enough to check out some of your other stuff. Doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does.
But even if it doesn't, well, let's say just hypothetical worst case scenario, it doesn't. You still wrote Kolchak the Night.
I still got to write Kolchak the Night Stalker. Absolutely.
That's
And I
right.
can point to that from now until the day oh my God, I wrote this character.
That's right. You did these cool things.
Yeah, I wrote this character I loved and I had a blast doing it. I even got paid a little, you know, so there was money involved. It's like, you know.
Yeah, and I think that might be the most surreal thing at the end. So last thing, and then we'll wrap up. I literally did a Power Rangers parody intro for a client not too long ago. The song's no longer in my head. It was in there for like a few weeks, right? But at the very end, I'm just like, I got paid to do a Power Rangers parody. That's fucking awesome. Yeah, that's right. I mean, that like. I like that's the strange and wonderfulness of being a creative is you don't know what projects can find your way to you, right? So
there is a fun little thing. I mean, it is fun to get known for writing a character.
Yeah,
like I didn't create Domino Lady; she was created in the 1930s. But I have a lot of people that I know. A lot of places, if they write my name, they're going to write Bobby Domino Lady Nash. You know. That that I've kind of become so associated with her from having written her so often that we're kind of intrinsically linked, and I love that. You know, I'm happy, I'm thrilled about it. You know,
and you know what? That's a heck of a legacy to do, Mr. Bobby. I think we've had a chat.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I wanted to say a couple things. If I go on the road and I head up into Atlanta, Georgia, would you love to do this in front of a camera or like in real life?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What? Okay. So when I'm on the road, I'll call my people will call your people. This guy,
my people. Right. Yeah.
Hey.
My people are just me with different accents.
So can you answer it with a British accent? Like just go full.
No.
Oh.
No, it's just different variations of this Southern accent.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it's they're not convincing. No, I am very much a one-man band. Now, I mean, I work with people, but you know, for the most part, it's me, and I work with. But no, I'd love to. That would be fun. I'd love to. You know, sit in the same room and chit chat. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we can go off camera so we can get into the really incriminating stuff. But anyways,
absolutely.
That's right. But before we wrap up, I did want to say two things to you before I go, and that's this: I have thoroughly enjoyed all the chats we've had throughout the years. You are an incredibly talented dude. Don't let anyone tell you different. You've done some really cool things, and I think you've had a hell of a career. Even though it's still not over, you've had a hell of a career. Right?
Yeah. I'd like to think there's still a little bit more, you know.
Oh no, there's you got
it's on an upward. It's actually oddly enough, and this sounds so weird to say, the pandemic and being locked down for almost 2 years did wonders for my career.
Same here.
Not only was I picking up new gigs, but I could do more because I was home every weekend instead of being on the road at conventions and appearances. And so, yeah, I the last 3 years have been probably pretty busy, probably the busiest of my career. And, you know, I'm loving it.
Like I said, I just crossed into freelance territory, but my followings have tripled and quadrupled. Just It's amazing to me how things evolve.
Hmm.
But good sir, all good things must come to an end, including this chat. So to wrap this up, what is out right now, and how can people find you?
Well, the most recent releases, the aforementioned Kolchak the Night Stalker 50th anniversary edition came out. I have a short story in the deluxe hardcover. I'm not in the paperback. I'm only in the hardcover. The paperback is all comics. The hardcover has comics and short stories. And so I wrote a short story. So that was a lot of fun. That was out recently. The first two books, I'm going to turn this so you can see the poster up there.
Yep.
Dante's 10th and Dante's Showdown just came out a month ago, a little over a month ago. Excuse me, it's the beginning of a Western horror series that I'm doing for Valhalla Books. Sorry, and Kolchak was done for Moonstone Books and Monstrous Books, worked on it together. So I did that for them. Valhalla Books is doing the Dante's books, and so book 3 will come out next year. The plan is to do one of those a year, and as long as people are buying them.
Mm-hmm.
So those are recent releases. I'm sure there's more. But yeah, BobbyNash.com has everything. You can see it all there, and there's always more on the way. I'm always working on multiple projects. There's various projects in different stages of development at publishers waiting to come out. I could probably take the rest of the year off and just wait for everything that's done to come out.
You would go,
You know.
you would go slowly crazy if you did
Oh, I
that.
would. Oh, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be slowly. It wouldn't. It wouldn't take
it
long.
wouldn't take long.
I don't. I don't do downtime well.
It's a common problem. I'm a
Yeah.
workaholic too.
What is it they say with writers are either thinking about writing or writing. So when
Pretty
you're not
much.
writing, you're thinking about, man, I should be writing. And
Yeah, so I got two links for everybody to wrap this bad boy up. And this first is my Patreon. So Just Joshing is going on the road once I break 1,000 episodes. I've already started putting what the new episodes are going to look like right now.
nice.
For $5. So for $5 a month, you'll actually get access to these episodes early. First episode's already up right now. My guest was Barb Sim, actress. We do a relationship episode, but there's going to be a bunch of interviews with a bunch of different creatives now eventually they will be released in other formats, but this is your first chance to get involved and also help me when I do go on the road, to keep the lights on. And on top of that, if you are looking for any freelancing advertising, I do advertising services. I make video, audio, words, and pictures for your projects and yourselves. You can definitely check that out there. And that will do it, ladies and gentlemen. I got a great couple of guests tomorrow evening. My time, their time, Saturday morning, because like the international thing is happening.
Mm.
But at least this one works in my favor. That's all I can say about that one. But for everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Stay inspired. Keep shining in the dark. I'll see you next time.